The consumer behavior has been completely changed in last years. Today we tweet, we Slack, we FaceTime, we buy on Amazon, we share on Facebook, and we watch YouTube before we buy. The companies who set their strategy on today's requirements, they have almost lost. Only those who think about tomorrow can survive in this tough competition. But what is tomorrow? How to build the strong brand of the future, and what rules should you follow? To get answers on this and some other questions, we invited a man who drives big companies, really big companies, to real success. Brands like Porsche, Siemens and Nike. This guy was working in the leading advertising and digital agencies. So today's face is Falk Ebert. Falk, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for joining. I have already introduced you, but maybe you can shortly tell us the story behind you. How did you get there where you are now?
Hello, Dennis. Thank you very much for having me. It's a great honor to be on your new show. How did I get where I am now? You know, I've never been a huge fan of privately owned cars. So this morning I took the train to Central Station and then I took a car-sharing car to get here in the studio.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much. Falk, you were working for many different agencies and you worked with great brands. What would you say, what makes successful brands successful?
Yes, so traditionally you would say communications. You have advertisement, big budgets in mass media, and you have public relations and these kind of things. Mm-hmm. However, when we look at the top lists of brands, like the most loved brands, the most financially successful brands, we see new kinds of brands emerge. And those brands not only or hardly get famous by and get branded by communications, they get big and they get famous and they get loved by what they do. So they create a great user experience without ever putting out any advertisement, and people just love them because when they use it, they have a good feeling about them.
Okay. Brand building is pretty expensive game, isn't it? Yeah. And not every company can afford this. What would you say when you just start to build a business? How important is brand building at the beginning when you just start from the ground?
Let's maybe take a step back. Because the traditional understanding of what a brand is it's something artificial that you can decide to be. You know, like you can say, do we want to be a brand? Don't we want to be a brand? And if you say, okay, we're a brand now, then you would traditionally be something like a brand that you can find in the supermarket and a brand that has a lot of budget for example, television spots. And people would say, for example, we're on the business-to-business sector. We don't need that kind of branding because for us it's all about reliability and relations and that kind of stuff. I would propose a different way of looking at what a brand is. To me, a brand is more about how do you look at things, especially how do you look at your company, your product, your service, yourself, your startup. And I think you should ask yourself two questions. First, are we being recognized? To what extent, and are we even recognizable maybe in the first place? And the second question would be, what cognitions do I stand for? What emotions, what feelings do I trigger? What actions do people associate with me? And if you look at your brand like this, you will see that you're building your brand the moment that you're starting, maybe even before. The moment you're giving a presentation to a potential investor, you're representing a brand. The moment that you talk to your neighbor about your cool project, you are representing a brand. So if you look at it from that angle, it does not mean that you have to be a big TV budget spender from the beginning, but you have to think about what do I want to stand for.
Mm-hmm. You said, think about the moment how you talk to your neighbor about your product. Brand building is one very important thing, but building a brand does not necessarily lead you to success. You should reach the audience, you should reach your clients. how to get these clients into the product, how to make the brand viral.
Yes, you're very right. It's not enough to just stand for something, because even if you stand for something, there's nobody listening to you right now.
Yes.
You don't have any reach, you don't have any customers, and so on. So when you ask me, how do you go viral, which is presumably the cheapest way to get attention? First of all, we should acknowledge that, of course, you cannot plan to go viral. That's an easy truth. However, to be honest, there are, for example, advertising agencies that have a track record of doing advertisement that can go viral. So you can be better or less good at going viral. That's an important thing to acknowledge. However, there's an even more important distinction that I would love to make. And I started thinking about this some years ago when I was writing my bachelor's thesis about viral marketing. And that distinction is, what is the source of your going viral? So, for example, you can have communications that go viral. Typically, you do a funny or emotionally TV spot, right? You can start a movement, quote unquote, and they say, oh, this is the real ... And then you say, if you want to join the real ... movement, just tweet it along with the hashtag real ... That kind of strategy. You can have publicity stunts where people say, wow, they did not really do that. And usually they did not. But it's like a publicity stunt and people are going to talk about it. So these things still work. But especially with modern products, with modern services, with the online world, the other way is becoming more important. And that is taking the other source for virality and taking your product or service as the source for going viral. So for example, if you think of an online game, yeah, you've probably played a browser game.
Unfortunately not, I'm not really into the games.
Good for you, then you just saved many hours of your life. How do these Facebook games become big, despite they don't have any huge TV budgets? And despite the fact that they are not that much of a great experience. They do it by building viral triggers into the game. So you would have, let's say, an amount of energy in the game. And if you want to keep playing, you need to reinvest energy. And then they say, hey, share this game with a friend or do something with a friend in the game, and you get more energy. And bam, you have a viral mechanism in the game. Also, think of a product that is the more valuable, the more people use it. It's super fun, like for the first user in the world, it's the most fun, for example, messaging app he's ever used. And then it gets more valuable the more people use it. It's called the network effect. Mm-hmm. If you have a great messenger, you want all your friends to use it as well, because then it's more valuable for you. So you start spreading the product virally automatically, because it's part of the product, not because you saw a funny ad somewhere. And I think that the second mechanism of going viral is also very important, and I would even say it's more manageable than the communication is going viral.
Well, these are all the benchmarks, the best examples, yeah. But not every brand is that successful, yeah. Some brands are less successful than others. And what would you say, what are the common mistakes companies do in the brand building? Yeah,
you're right, there are mistakes, and just being a big company does not mean that you're flawless in your marketing. Let's break it down. Like the first and biggest mistake that you can make strategically would be that you don't know your brand. Ask the CEO of a mid-sized company, what do you stand for, what is your brand? And he says, we're the leading provider of solutions in our area of expertise, which is a nice description of what he might think, but not a brand. So what happens if the CEO doesn't know their brand? The middle management won't have any interest to act according to that brand, and then the people who actually do the communications, like agencies, like public relations, but also every employee talking to others, will have a very hard time building on that brand. What do you get? You get noise, you don't get a signal. This is what you want. You want a signal that transmits your brand in the noise of the environment. Secondly, if they define their brand, big companies often make the mistake of not taking any risks and not differentiating themselves anyhow. So for example, they would say things like, we are very honest, we are important, big, whatever it is. But if you ask would the opposite be true for any company in the world? Usually the answer is no. For example, a company would say, we're honest. And you ask, okay, who of your competitors is not honest? The answer is no one. So it's not differentiating. You're not making a difference. And again, you want to have a signal out there, not noise, technically speaking. So what you get is noise. You don't stand out in the competitive environment. And finally, you can see that brands are like very far apart from their target audiences or from their stakeholders they have, which is understandable. Imagine a company, like a huge international company. They have 100,000 employees. These companies are no longer just companies. They start to build cities that's just for them. You go to a city and there's a city within the city and it's just that company. Of course, there's a corporate culture coming up. Of course, they lose a bit the touch with the outside world. And then things happen like during a crisis. They have a completely different perspective on what caused the crisis and what their fault is. And people outside are not going to understand the inside position. So they make not effective communications. Or take, for example, surveys that I've seen that said, they asked employees, what do you want to communicate? What do you want to stand for? What do you do in your everyday life? And then they asked the clients. And the client said, well, we want a reliable partner and we want somebody who is responsible. However, all the company wanted to do and to talk about and to put budgets on was innovation. But the clients literally said, I don't care about your innovation. I just want a reliable partner. Again, like these companies are losing track of what's going on in the outside world and how the actual clients act, what they want, what they feel, what they need. So you need really good mechanisms to avoid that kind of third mistake in a company.
Losing the track and not knowing your USP, not knowing your brand, what your brand is a problem. What would you say, what is easier, to build a brand from the beginning or to transform it from the previous one?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because many brands have the challenge of they need to transform right now. And psychologically, we know that there's no such thing as unlearning. You can only learn new things on top of the old things. And if they contradict the old things, it might be even harder to change the cognition of people. So how do you deal with it? I don't have a final answer, but it's important to understand that there are more than just the two binary options. It's not just new brand or old brand, but you can also say you expand the brand a little bit and see how your audiences react and then decide. And then you can say, do we want to have a sub-brand maybe, like brand name by company brand name? Or you can have an endorsement. You say, that's the new brand by. Because like building up a brand takes, as you said, a lot of time, energy, persistence, history. Some of these brands have been around for 100 years. Even if it's very hard to change the brands because it's hard to change the culture behind them, to change the corporate culture, it might not be a good idea to throw them away just from the one day to the other because they're really valuable and you might end up with having nothing if your plan doesn't work.
Yeah. You said that communication is the most important point.
One of the most
important points for the brand building. Today we see a lot of chatbots which are overhyped, from my point of view. Would you say that chatbots will change the way we communicate with our clients?
Yeah, I mean, we can agree on the fact that there's a lot of talking about chatbots, but are you using one?
I'm not using it at all. I don't see any sense in it. I'm just preset answers on the preset questions, that's it.
Yeah, so they're not being very clever at the moment. I don't use one regularly as well. Maybe for things like, hey Google, start a timer for 10 minutes when I'm doing pasta sauce or something like that. But I still wouldn't discount them as being not valuable. You know, like we have to see where the thing goes. At the moment they're being overhyped, but you know the trend cycle, they will get better by time, and then maybe they bring value to people's life in some time. We can think of this as maybe a U-turn. In the old days, when you wanted to book a flight, you've been calling somebody, hello, please give me a flight. Then they would say, here are your options. And then you would say, yes, I want that one. Is that confirmed? Give me a name, da-da-da. Then technology came around. We started having form sheets where you fill in your name, you get the options through an interface and that kind of stuff, and it became a bit annoying. So we have people like you that make these interfaces better, right? You try to have less buttons, less clutter, more personalization, and so just the logical next step might be that we go back to natural language, but we use it with machines. So if you have a system that is very close, that has very definite data points like an airport or like an airline, it might help to have a chatbot, and it might even work that you ask the chatbot, hey, I need to get to that city tomorrow. How do I do it? And it might give you answers and you say, please book that one for me. But we're still very far from that one. Yeah.
Okay. There are actually many trends like chatbots. When we look like artificial intelligence, chatbots we already talked about, even smartwatches, which are not really doing well right now. And what would you say, what are the trends, or how to predict accurately the right trend where we should invest money in?
Yeah, so trends fail, of course. We'll see about smartwatches. I'm wearing one right now. You're not wearing one.
I'm not.
You're still an influencer and an early adopter, so we'll see where that goes. But yeah, the question arises for a company, should I put my money on that, or is it just a fad? The one thing that I think is important to remember is that even if the trend fails and it does not get traction and widespread attention in the long term, like Google Glass, it might not be bad to put some money on it and experiment a bit with it. Because the moment that you are the first one who does something, and the moment that you have a little project ongoing with it, just exploring the possibilities and talking about it, just coming up with some concepts and talking about it, you get a perception as, again, a company that is trying out things. And then employees might say, hey, there are great things being tested in that company, I want to be part of that. Your buyers, your potential customers might say, this company is already thinking about tomorrow, so their products that are being placed in the present must be very well, and they are not outdated, that kind of thing. And you also get a bit of, we talked about viral effects. I think if you're the first company to implement such a trend, or one of the first, you also get a bit of attention and that kind of thing. So it might be a good strategy to tactically do some experiments with new trends and talk about them. Then you can very well and very easily see the potential it has for your customers right now, but you don't have to spend all your money on it. Just try it out a bit, talk about it, and then see where it goes. Like, fail fast, fail cheap, as they say in the Valley. Yeah.
So Falk, thank you very much for this great talk.
Again, thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure to have you here. Thank you. Falk, if you had only one source on the internet, which one would you recommend to our followers?
It's not easy to pick one. Many great sources out there. But I want to recommend the Strategery blog by Ben Thompson. I will send you the link.
Great. We will definitely put it under the video. Build great brands, and we will help you to follow the right trends. Just keep an eye on our channel on YouTube. So see you next time on zFace. Bye-bye.